The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Mia stared at the email on her laptop screen, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. The words blurred together: rejected, not viable, too risky. Her director's curt dismissal of months of relentless work hit her like a freight train. She had poured everything into this project: late nights, weekends, skipped meals, even arguments with friends who begged her to take a break. And now, all that effort lay crumpled in a single sentence. Mia sat frozen in her chair, staring blankly at the sterile office walls around her. It was 8:47 p.m., and the building was eerily quiet except for the hum of computers and the distant echo of footsteps from someone leaving for the night. Her hands trembled slightly as they hovered over the keyboard before she closed the lid of her laptop with an audible snap. She didn't trust herself to respond, not yet. Not when anger and disbelief were still clawing at her throat. She leaned back in her chair, letting out a shaky breath. How had it come to this? Just weeks ago, she'd been standing in front of the executive board, presenting her AI forecasting tool with trembling excitement. The algorithm wasn't just another piece of software, it was revolutionary. It could predict market trends with uncanny accuracy by analyzing patterns no human analyst would ever notice. She'd spent countless hours fine-tuning its neural networks, feeding it datasets spanning decades, testing and retesting until the predictions were almost eerily precise. But none of that mattered now. To her director, it was nothing more than a gamble, a shiny toy with no guaranteed return on investment. "We're not ready for something this experimental," he'd said during their meeting earlier that week. His tone had been final, dismissive. He hadn't even looked her in the eye. Mia clenched her fists under the desk, nails digging into her palms. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but what good would that do? This wasn't the first time she'd faced rejection in her career, but this felt different. This wasn't just about pride or ego, it was personal. Every line of code, every sleepless night, every spark of inspiration had led her here. And now, it was gone. Her phone buzzed against the wooden surface of her desk, startling her out of her thoughts. Glancing down, she saw a text message from her best friend, Rachel. "You okay? You've been MIA all day." Mia hesitated before typing a reply. What could she say? That her dreams had been crushed in one fell swoop? That she felt like a failure despite knowing, deep down, that her work was groundbreaking? Instead, she settled for something vague: long day. "I'll call you tomorrow." As she sent the message, a memory surfaced unbidden, the moment she'd first pitched the idea to her team months ago. They'd been skeptical then too, but Mia had convinced them to give her 6 months. 6 months to prove herself, to show that her vision wasn't just wishful thinking. Now those 6 months were up, and instead of celebrating a triumph, she was sitting alone in an empty office, wondering where it had all gone wrong. Her gaze drifted to the corner of her desk, where a small framed photo of her younger self stood next to a stack of papers. In the picture, she was holding up a robotics trophy at a high school science fair, grinning ear to ear. Back then, failure had seemed impossible. Every obstacle had only fueled her determination to push harder, think smarter, dream bigger. But this felt insurmountable. A sharp knock on the door jolted her out of her reverie. Startled, she turned to see Jake, one of the senior developers, poking his head into the room. He looked tired, his tie loosened and his shirt sleeves rolled up. "Hey," he said softly, stepping inside. "I heard about the meeting." Mia forced a tight smile. News travels fast. Jake sighed, closing the door behind him. "I'm sorry, Mia. I know how much this meant to you." "It shouldn't have happened," she blurted out before she could stop herself. Her voice cracked, betraying the frustration she'd been trying so hard to suppress. They didn't even listen. They didn't understand what this tool could do, for us, for the industry. For everything. Jake nodded slowly, his expression sympathetic. "I get it. And honestly, I think you're right. Your algorithm is incredible. But you know how it is with these guys, they don't want to take risks unless there's zero chance of failure." Mia let out a bitter laugh. Zero chance of failure doesn't exist. If it did, we'd all be billionaires by now. Jake chuckled weakly but quickly sobered. "Listen, I don't know what happens next, but don't let this break you. You've got talent, Mia. Real talent. Don't waste it because some suits can't see past their spreadsheets." His words lingered in the air long after he left, closing the door gently behind him. Mia stared at the spot where he'd stood, her mind racing. Talent, vision, passion. None of it mattered if no one believed in you. Or worse, if they didn't care enough to try. She opened her laptop again, her fingers hovering over the keys. There had to be another way. Another path forward. As much as it hurt to admit, maybe this company wasn't the place for her anymore. Maybe it never had been. But where did that leave her? The next morning, Mia arrived at the office earlier than usual, determined to salvage whatever scraps of dignity she had left. She avoided eye contact with her coworkers, ducking into the break room to grab a cup of coffee before retreating to her desk. By the time her colleagues began trickling in, she was already buried in emails, pretending to be busy. Still, whispers followed her. She caught snippets of conversations as people passed by her cubicle. Did you hear about Mia's project? Yeah, apparently they shot it down. Shame though. Sounded cool. Each word felt like a knife twisting deeper into her chest. By mid-afternoon, she couldn't stand it anymore. Grabbing her coat, she slipped out of the office without telling anyone where she was going. The crisp autumn air hit her face as she stepped outside, clearing her head just enough to breathe properly for the first time all day. She wandered aimlessly through the city streets, weaving between throngs of pedestrians rushing to meetings or lunch dates. No one paid her any attention, which suited her just fine. Eventually, she found herself in a quiet park tucked away from the chaos of downtown. Autumn leaves swirled around her feet as she sank onto a bench, pulling her knees to her chest. For the first time since receiving the rejection, she allowed herself to cry, not loudly or dramatically, but quietly, tears streaming down her cheeks as she stared at the ground. When she finally wiped her eyes, she noticed a man sitting a few benches away, watching her curiously. He looked vaguely familiar, though she couldn't place him. Tall with salt and pepper hair and a tailored suit, he radiated an air of authority that made her instinctively wary. Are you all right? He asked, his voice calm but probing. Mia hesitated, unsure whether to answer. Finally, she shrugged. Just having a rough day. He nodded knowingly, standing and walking over to her bench. Mind if I sit? She gestured weakly toward the empty space beside her, too drained to argue. Up close, she realized why he seemed familiar. He worked for Nexus Tech, one of their biggest competitors. She'd seen him speak at conferences before, though she couldn't recall his name. I recognize you, he said, confirming her suspicion. You're Mia, right? From Data Core. She stiffened, suddenly alert. Yes. He extended a hand, smiling warmly. Daniel Pierce, VP of Innovation at Nexus Tech. We've never officially met, but I've heard great things about your work. Mia shook his hand cautiously, unsure where this conversation was headed. Thanks. Daniel leaned back, studying her intently. I assume you've heard about our latest acquisition? Her stomach churned. Acquisition? Of what? She shook her head mutely. He smirked, clearly enjoying her confusion. Let's just say, we recently purchased a very interesting piece of technology. Something that could change the game for predictive analytics. Mia's blood ran cold. Could he mean? No, it was impossible. Wasn't it? Before she could respond, Daniel continued, his tone casual but deliberate. It's funny, really. Sometimes the most brilliant ideas are overlooked by those closest to them. But when they fall into the right hands, he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Mia's mind raced. Had someone stolen her algorithm? Sold it behind her back? The thought made her sick to her stomach. You look pale, Daniel observed, his smile widening. Is everything okay? She forced herself to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. What exactly are you saying? Daniel tilted his head, feigning innocence. Nothing specific. Just making conversation. But if you're curious, he pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. Feel free to reach out anytime. I'd love to discuss potential opportunities. With that he stood, straightening his jacket. Take care, Mia. I hope things turn around for you soon. And with that he walked away, leaving her clutching the card in stunned silence. Over the next few days, Mia became obsessed with uncovering the truth. She scoured industry news sites, forums, and social media for any mention of Nexus Tech's mysterious acquisition. At first, there was nothing, but then, late one evening, she stumbled upon an article buried deep within a tech blog. The headline sent chills down her spine: Nexus Tech acquires groundbreaking AI forecasting tool for 7 figures. Beneath it was a photo of Daniel Pierce, grinning smugly as he held up a plaque emblazoned with the company logo. The accompanying text described the tool in glowing terms, praising its ability to revolutionize data analysis across multiple industries. There was no explicit mention of her name, but the details matched her algorithm perfectly. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the comments section, where users speculated about the origins of the technology. Some credited Nexus Tech's R&D team, while others suggested it might have been developed externally. No one seemed to suspect foul play, or if they did, they weren't saying so publicly. Mia closed her laptop, her mind reeling. Someone had betrayed her. Someone had sold her life's work to the highest bidder, and now they were reaping the rewards while she was left with nothing. The injustice burned hotter than ever, fueling a fire within her that refused to die. She couldn't let this stand. She wouldn't. But revenge wouldn't come easily. First, she needed proof. And finding it would require taking risks she'd never imagined possible. Determined to expose the truth, Mia began piecing together clues from her time at DataCore. She started with internal communications, combing through archived emails and Slack messages for anything suspicious. Most of it was mundane, routine updates, meeting notes, harmless chatter, but occasionally, she'd stumble upon something intriguing. One such discovery came in the form of a cryptic exchange between 2 senior executives. The thread was brief, consisting of only 3 messages. Project Horizon, is it ready? Almost. Final tweaks needed. Good. Let's move quickly. Time is critical. At first glance, it seemed innocuous. But the timing caught Mia's attention. The conversation had taken place mere days before her presentation to the executive board. Could Project Horizon refer to her algorithm? And if so, why had they been discussing it without involving her? Her suspicions grew stronger when she cross-referenced the timestamps with access logs for the company's secure servers. Sure enough, several unauthorized entries corresponded with the dates of the emails. Someone had been tampering with her files. But who? Mia narrowed her focus to a handful of individuals with both motive and opportunity. One name kept surfacing: Marcus Lane, the head of product development. He'd always been dismissive of her ideas, often dismissing them as impractical or overly ambitious. Yet he'd also been present at every key meeting related to her project. Confronting him directly wasn't an option, not yet. Instead, Mia decided to dig deeper into his background, hoping to uncover a smoking gun. Late one night, as the rest of the office slept, she hacked into the HR database using credentials she'd memorized during a routine audit months earlier. What she found shocked her. Hidden beneath layers of redacted documents and sealed references was a trail of misconduct allegations dating back years. Accusations of intellectual property theft, sabotage, even blackmail, all quietly swept under the rug by upper management. It appeared Marcus had a history of exploiting others' work for personal gain, and no one had dared to challenge him. Armed with this knowledge, Mia devised a plan. She knew she couldn't fight him alone. She needed allies. Allies who understood the stakes and were willing to risk everything to bring him down. Her first call was to Rachel, who listened in stunned silence as Mia recounted everything she'd uncovered. "This guy sounds like a nightmare," Rachel said when Mia finished. "Are you sure you want to go after him?" "I don't have a choice," Mia replied firmly. "If I don't, he'll keep doing this, to me, to others. I can't let that happen." Rachel hesitated, then sighed. "All right. What do you need from me?" "Everything," Mia said. "Access, resources, connections. Whatever it takes." Rachel agreed, promising to reach out to mutual contacts who might be able to help. Meanwhile, Mia reached out to former colleagues and industry insiders, carefully planting seeds of doubt about Marcus's integrity. Slowly but surely, a network of support began to form around her. Yet even as her resolve strengthened, doubts lingered. Could she truly win against someone as powerful and ruthless as Marcus? Or was she setting herself up for an even greater fall? Only time would tell. As weeks turned into months, Mia threw herself into building a new version of her algorithm, one that couldn't be stolen or replicated. Working tirelessly from a makeshift home office, she refined every aspect of the program, adding layers of encryption and proprietary safeguards designed to thwart any attempts at reverse engineering. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Word spread among her network of supporters, drawing interest from investors eager to back her venture. Encouraged by their faith, Mia began drafting plans for a startup, a bold move that terrified her as much as it excited her. But launching a company required capital, and securing funding meant facing scrutiny from skeptics who questioned her credibility after the data core debacle. Undeterred, Mia prepared meticulously for each pitch, channeling her anger and frustration into a compelling narrative about resilience, innovation, and the transformative power of technology. Her first meeting with potential investors took place in a sleek conference room overlooking the city skyline. Dressed in a sharp blazer and heels, Mia stood confidently at the head of the table, projecting slides filled with graphs, charts, and testimonials from beta testers who'd used her updated algorithm. Her passion was palpable, her conviction unwavering. "So, Ms. Carter," one investor said after her presentation, leaning forward with genuine curiosity, "why should we believe this won't end the same way as last time?" Mia met his gaze steadily, her voice steady despite the weight of the question. "Because this isn't just about me anymore. It's about proving that brilliance deserves recognition, regardless of who wields it. And I intend to make sure it does." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, slowly, nods of approval rippled through the group. "Well said," the investor murmured, breaking into a smile. "Let's talk numbers." For the first time in what felt like forever, Mia allowed herself a flicker of hope. Perhaps redemption wasn't as far out of reach as she'd feared. Perhaps with enough grit and determination, she could rewrite her story, and reclaim what had been taken from her. But victory was still a long way off. Ahead lay battles yet unfought, obstacles yet unseen. And looming over it all was the specter of Marcus Lane, whose shadow continued to loom large over her journey. Mia knew she couldn't afford to falter, not now, not ever. Because failure wasn't an option. Not anymore. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Mia threw herself into finalizing her startup's business plan, securing patents for her algorithm, and assembling a team of trusted collaborators who shared her vision. Each step forward brought its own challenges, convincing skeptical investors, navigating legal hurdles, and ensuring her technology was bulletproof against future exploitation, but she faced them with relentless determination. Her nights were long, often stretching into the early hours of the morning as she pored over spreadsheets, code reviews, and market analyses. Yet, despite the exhaustion, there was an undeniable sense of purpose driving her. For the first time in months, Mia felt like she was reclaiming control of her life, and her legacy. One evening, as she sat cross-legged on her living room floor surrounded by stacks of documents and half-empty coffee cups, Rachel walked in unannounced, carrying a bag of takeout and a bottle of wine. "You look like you're about to pass out," Rachel said, setting the food down on the cluttered coffee table. "When's the last time you ate something that didn't come from a vending machine?" Mia glanced up, blinking blearily. Yesterday? Maybe." Rachel rolled her eyes but smiled warmly. "Well, tonight, you're taking a break. No excuses." As they ate together, Rachel asked about the progress of Mia's startup. The conversation shifted naturally to Marcus Lane, whose name still sent a shiver down Mia's spine. "Have you heard anything from him?" Rachel asked cautiously. Mia shook her head. "Nothing directly. But I know he's aware of what I'm doing. Word gets around fast in this industry." Rachel frowned. "Do you think he'll try to interfere again?" "I'd be surprised if he didn't," Mia admitted. "But this time, I'm ready for him. Everything we've built is protected, and I've got people watching my back. If he makes one wrong move," she trailed off, a steely glint in her eyes. Rachel raised her glass. "To kicking his ass, then." Mia clinked her glass against Rachel's, a small smile breaking through her fatigue. "To kicking his ass." A few weeks later, Mia stood at the podium in front of a packed auditorium, her heart pounding as she prepared to unveil her company's flagship product, Horizon AI. The event had drawn significant attention, with tech journalists, venture capitalists, and industry leaders filling every seat. Cameras flashed, and murmurs rippled through the crowd as she adjusted the microphone. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter, not just for me, but for the way we approach data and decision-making." She clicked to the first slide, which displayed a sleek logo alongside a tagline, "Predicting tomorrow, transforming today." The audience leaned forward, captivated. For years, industries have relied on traditional forecasting methods that are slow, limited, and often inaccurate. But what if we could change that? What if we could harness the power of artificial intelligence to predict trends with unprecedented precision? Mia went on to explain how Horizon AI worked, showcasing real-world examples where beta testers had used the tool to achieve remarkable results. Retailers had optimized inventory levels, reducing waste by 30%. Financial institutions had identified emerging markets months before their competitors. Even healthcare providers had leveraged the algorithm to anticipate patient needs and allocate resources more effectively. By the time she reached the end of her presentation, the room erupted into applause. Reporters rushed to the stage, firing questions about scalability, pricing models, and potential partnerships. It was overwhelming, but exhilarating. Afterward, as Mia mingled with attendees during the networking session, she spotted Daniel Pierce across the room. He caught her eye and gave her a subtle nod, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Mia felt a pang of unease. Had Nexus Tech played a role in leaking her original algorithm? Was he here to sabotage her efforts? But when he approached her, his demeanor was surprisingly cordial. "Congratulations, Mia," he said, extending a hand. "You've done something truly remarkable." She hesitated before shaking his hand, searching his face for any hint of duplicity. "Thank you. Though I imagine you might have mixed feelings about it." Daniel chuckled softly. "Let's just say I underestimated you, and your resolve. Your algorithm has already made waves in the industry, and now this? You're going to change the game." His words caught her off guard. "Why are you telling me this?" He shrugged. "Because talent deserves recognition. And because I think we can both agree that innovation shouldn't be stifled by fear or greed." Mia studied him for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough." As Daniel walked away, she couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Whatever part Nexus Tech had played in her past struggles, they no longer held any power over her. Her future belonged to her, and to the people who believed in her vision. Months passed, and Horizon AI quickly gained traction. Major corporations signed on as clients, eager to integrate the tool into their operations. Tech publications hailed Mia as a visionary, praising her resilience and ingenuity. Investors lined up to support her next ventures, confident in her ability to deliver groundbreaking solutions. Meanwhile, whispers of Marcus Lane's misconduct began to surface publicly. Former employees came forward with allegations of unethical behavior, prompting internal investigations at DataCore. Within a year, Marcus was forced to resign, his reputation irreparably tarnished. For Mia, the culmination of her hard work arrived on a crisp spring morning when she received an email from a prestigious global organization announcing that Horizon AI had won the Innovation Award for Excellence in Technology. As she read the message, tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of pride and relief. That evening, she celebrated with her team at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city skyline. Laughter filled the air as glasses clinked and stories were shared. At one point, Rachel pulled Mia aside, her expression thoughtful. "You know," Rachel said, "when all this started, I wasn't sure you'd make it through. But look at you now. You've turned everything around." Mia smiled, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up. But I realized something along the way: failure isn't the end unless you let it be. Sometimes, it's just the beginning of something better." Rachel hugged her tightly. "Well, whatever comes next, I know you'll crush it." Mia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Thanks, Rach. For everything." As the night wore on, Mia found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here, the setbacks, the betrayals, the late nights spent chasing a dream that once seemed impossible. Through it all, she had discovered strength she never knew she possessed and forged connections that would last a lifetime. Standing under the stars, surrounded by people who believed in her, Mia finally allowed herself to savor the sweetness of triumph. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face them head-on. And as the city lights twinkled below, she knew one thing for certain: her story was far from over.